Brent, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Hi, awesome. Yes, I
Hi.
absolutely can hear you. We're live on Facebook. Welcome back for another month of movie reviews. I'm Danielle Finley. I am the guest host here at Frankie Sense, and I'm here with Brent Marchand, who I'm developing such a wonderful relationship with. I just am, you're my go-to for movies now. I'm just like, what would Brent think? Oh, I'm going to watch this movie. I wonder if he's reviewed this one before. Brent Marchand is a film critic out of Chicago. Lucky. You're in Chicago, right?
Yes.
Okay, one of my absolute favorite cities. You're so lucky. It is
It's a
so beautiful.
such a great place.
I can't wait until I go back. It's so gorgeous. I'm so envious you live there. BrentMarchand.com for all the great things that he's got upcoming. But he is the author of 3 really incredible books. Get the picture, Conscious Creation Goes to the Movies, Consciously Created Cinema, The Movie Lover's Guide to the Law of Attraction, and Third Reel, Conscious Creation Goes Back to the Movies. And you've got another one on the go, I hear, yes?
Yeah, I do. I do.
And what,
That one's going to be probably a little while coming because looks like it's going to be a very long project, probably maybe even in 2 volumes.
oh, wow.
Yeah.
Look
Yeah,
at
it covers a
you.
lot of ground.
Good for you. You are a busy man.
Keeps me out of trouble.
Well, we've all got to find something that keeps us out of trouble, don't we? Okay, you've got a lot to talk about this month.
Yes, I
So
do.
let's get started.
Okay, so today we've got 4 movies to talk about. We have 3 to talk about to avoid. And then we're going to have a long, very quick list of movies to see that played at film festivals. Those are going to be pretty much just more like one-liners about them. But I also just recently put up a post on the Good Radio Network website listing mini reviews of each of those films. So if we don't get to talk about them in depth here, just go to the website and you can see reviews of all those films.
Awesome.
So, okay, so as far as the 4 that I would recommend,
Let's get to it.
Start off with a really unusual film from Iceland called Lamb. And this is based on an Icelandic folktale. In many ways, it's like seeing one of the Grimm's Brothers stories brought to life in a contemporary setting. Basically, this is a kind of a hard movie to talk about without giving away too much. So it tells the story of a childless farm couple that leads a rather bleak existence, farming and taking care of the herd. And they've obviously experienced some kind of personal tragedy at some point in the past. They don't really talk about it, but it's affected them profoundly. And doesn't really give them a lot to look forward to on a daily basis. But when spring comes and they start having the lambing season, they, start sprouting smiles a bit more often with the arrival of the young ones. Until one day when something really, really unusual happens in the barn with the birth of one of the sheep. And at this point, it's kind of hard for me to talk about this one because if I talk about it in any great detail, it could be considered a spoiler. So for those who don't want to know what's going to happen, well, go get a cup of coffee or something like that. Come back. Essentially, the newborn that arrives is a lamb-human hybrid. And the couple ends up adopting the child as essentially their own daughter. And suddenly life on the farm is full of happiness and joy and so forth. But the question is, will it last? And that's kind of what the story talks about as it plays out towards its conclusion. It's an unusual mix of what I would call folktale, horror, dark comedy for sure. I mean, some of the images are really pretty funny. But it ends up being essentially a morality play, like many fairy tales and folk tales are. And shows how the characters in this film respond to those particular conditions. So that's where I'm going to leave it. I'm not going to go into any greater detail than that because that would give away way too much. But Um, what the film is, it's gorgeously filmed. Shows off the Icelandic landscape beautifully. Um, and it's really interesting in terms of the way it builds kind of sinister tension, but with a comedic edge to it. You end up seeing these images that look a little bit on the macabre or ominous side, but there's an underlying current of humor through it as it runs, through the story. And you end up finding yourself sitting there laughing at it, thinking, should I really be laughing at this? But you can't help but laugh at it because it's funny. And on top of it, the director who made this film, it's his debut feature, he ended up doing a lot with showing things rather than telling, which is, to me, always a great way of making a film very effective. And he does it in some cases with really very simple techniques, like showing images without commentary, but you end up getting the implication from it, and it's pretty strong. And that's particularly true in his shots involving reactions from the farm animals. Suddenly you find a flock of sheep that are a little ominous in the way they look, but it's filmed in a way that makes you laugh, like who would be afraid of a sheep, You also have a farm cat who is kind of wise to what's going on, and the cat has these very stern, sober, knowing looks on its face. And then you also have a herding dog who basically is kind of caught in the middle, and sometimes is doing his job diligently as a herding dog, and other times he's got these looks of absolute terror on his face when he sees some of these other things starting to unfold. So it's a good picture. I mean, it was very unexpected, pleasant surprise. It's been playing in theaters, and it's now getting ready to go to streaming and also to home media. So I recommend this one very highly. It's really very, very well done. Again, a totally refreshing, unexpected surprise, and a really good fusion of multiple film genres in one vehicle.
I was just going to say that, like, I'm uber intrigued, and I don't read the information that you provide to me before we go live, because I want to be shocked. I don't want to have any preconceived ideas or notions or anything about the movies that we speak about. But as you're talking about it, I'm just like, this is like so like fairy tale / children movie / Babe Pig in the City. Like, this is, as you're talking about it, I'm like, animals and really gentle and nurturing and farmland and really beautiful, but there is this dark side of it that you touch on. And that's what makes it not Pixar or, Walt Disney or, appealing to a younger generation or a younger audience.
That's true. I mean, it really, when you think about the nature of a lot of fairy tales from the Grimm's brothers, they're kind of gruesome. I mean, they might be dressed up in cute, frilly little packages, but the underlying activities in them are kind of downright nasty.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
And that's very much the case with this, in the way that this story is told. And it's doing so in a contemporary setting. And it's doing so almost entirely with adults. So it's something that, if you didn't learn your lesson in childhood, well, maybe you need to do it when you're a grown-up.
Yeah.
And in some ways, that lesson might end up being more difficult or more challenging this time because, well, you should have gotten the message earlier, but you didn't.
Yeah, I love that it's filmed in Iceland as well. That's definitely one of the places that I would love to travel to. So, just having the location and to be able to be part of it, I think is really key. Tell me about the actors.
The actors are mostly Icelandic actors, but the female lead is played by Noomi Rapace, the Swedish actress, who was in movies like Prometheus a few years ago, the science fiction movie. And also, I believe she was in the the girl with the dragon tattoo. Yeah.
Okay.
So
Okay. All right.
she always takes roles that are a little bit on the out there, kind of aspect. And certainly that's very much the case here.
Wow. Wow. This is a good
Yeah.
one. Nice,
Yeah.
like kickstart the session or like our
Yeah.
time together. That's a
Yeah.
really good one. Okay.
It's worth seeing.
How many stars?
4.5. Yeah.
Whoa. Interesting.
There are,
Okay.
there are a few elements of the story that could have been developed a little better than they were, but that's a pretty minor shortcoming in the overall scheme of things.
Good. All right. Well, thanks for that one. Good. Okay. And it's playing in theaters right now.
Okay.
Is that's what you said, right? It's playing in theaters right now?
Yeah, it's getting close to nearing the end of its theatrical run.
Okay.
It's been out for about a month. But it is available for streaming, and it's going to be available on home media as well very shortly. So
good. I can't wait. Good. Okay, next one.
Okay, so the next movie is the latest offering from director Wes Anderson called The French Dispatch. And Wes Anderson is a filmmaker who's known for doing very quirky little films. They're very highly stylized in terms of the production design, the art direction, the costuming, and so forth. The cinematography. And this is essentially, it's a collection of vignettes about stories from a French publication that was purchased by an American newspaper. It was originally kind of like a poor man's New Yorker or like a Sunday supplement magazine that featured, quality stories and quality writing. It's essentially a throwback to an homage to old-time journalism and the correspondents who worked diligently to bring interesting stories to American audiences. And as I say, it's told in several vignettes about the nature of the town where the French publication was based.
Mm-hmm.
And then also tells several stories taken from the pages of the magazine. One about art, one about politics, and one about cuisine.
Okay.
And each one is different. The one about art, I believe, was probably the best done. The political one starts out strongly and then kind of fizzles. And the cuisine one starts out fizzling, but warms up and gets strong to the end. So all of Anderson's films have got a very distinctive look to them. You can't really miss identifying them when you see them. And that's very much the case here. And it's reflected in the sets, the costumes, the cinematography, the acting. And as in a number of his other recent films, he's basically pulled together this incredible all-star cast, including people like Bill Murray, Tilda Swinton, Frances McDormand, Owen Wilson, Timothy Chalamet, Jeffrey Wright, and the list, Benicio del Toro, and I mean the list just goes on, including a lot of other people who play basically almost like small walk-on roles.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's loaded with people, like really great
really
talent.
Is. Yeah, I mean, you even kind of sit there and they don't necessarily give a lot of billing to these people in the credits.
Yeah.
But you'll see people there like Edward Norton and Willem Dafoe. Wow. And who else? Well, basically, I mean, like I said, the list just goes on forever, it seems.
That's insane. That's amazing. Yeah. I didn't know that. That's great.
He's known for drawing together casts of that size and impressiveness. I mean, if you look back to a movie he made a few years ago called The Grand Budapest Hotel,
yes,
this is very much in the same vein as that.
Okay.
The one problem that I have with this film, as I often have with a number of Anderson's films, is that he's very long on style, but not always as strong on substance as he could be. And that's apparent again here. Although this is certainly probably better substance than he's had in a lot of his other films.
Mm-hmm.
So you will definitely be entertained by this. It's just that it's unfortunate that it's not as consistently entertaining all the way through. Um, there are places where it sags a little bit, or things don't quite get developed to the degree maybe they should. So if you can overlook that, um, you'll have a good time at the pictures. So
That's
um,
great. Why did
yeah.
you pick this one to talk about this month?
This one, I sort of picked this one for personal reasons because I studied and practiced as a journalist for a number of years myself.
Mm-hmm.
And when I see what's happened to journalism these days, it kind of makes me long somewhat for the old days when people really were committed to being objective, um, integrity-filled journalists.
Yes.
You don't really see a lot of that anymore with the way the media is developed these days.
You sure don't. We were talking about that with a girlfriend yesterday, and we were talking about how just everything is so biased now. You never see two sides. You hear somebody's opinion, and it's hard. It's really harsh. And I agree. I miss those days, where you could build your own opinion. Right now, we're just being told things.
Yeah, when you had the stories of these old-time foreign correspondents who were writing about, various things, their stories definitely had an opinion too, but it wasn't so in your face.
Yeah,
wasn't so blatantly biased the way the media is doing it now, that you would end up losing the point of what the story was trying to tell you.
Yeah.
But this one is it's fun. I'm sure it'll end up getting nominated for certainly a number of technical awards during award season, particularly for areas like costume design, art design, cinematography, perhaps editing. And we're seeing it just for that in many ways. Like I say, just don't expect that it's going to be consistently good all the way throughout.
Fair enough. Okay. How many stars?
3.5.
Ooh. Yeah. A good Sunday afternoon.
Yeah.
Just kind of little flick as you got, out in the town kind of thing. No, 3.5. That's good. Okay. Anything else you want to add about this one before we move on?
This one is playing in theaters right now. It'll probably be going to streaming fairly soon. I would guess maybe a couple of weeks.
Good. Oh, you know what? All the ones that you recommend, I mean, they definitely intrigue me. And it gives me you never give too much away that doesn't make me want to watch them.
That's a definite no-no. I mean, the only time that I really do give away endings is if it's something that's based on historical fact.
Yeah.
And everybody already knows what the ending's going to be anyways. I mean, we all know what's going to happen in Titanic.
Totally. Totally. Exactly. Fair enough. No, and I really appreciate that. And I'm sure that our viewers and listeners do as well, because, you don't want to know the ending. I want to figure it out on myself, but I really do appreciate your opinion on them and what you're filling us in with. And the ones that you bring to our attention, I otherwise probably would not see, especially the ones to avoid. I can't wait to get to that. Okay, we got 2 more to talk about.
Yes. The next one is a documentary that was made in 2019. It's just now getting released. Was kind of disappointed it took so long to come out, but it's called the Capote Tapes. And this is the second film documentary that's come out this year involving Truman Capote. The first one, Truman in Tennessee, was about his friendship and relationship with fellow writer Tennessee Williams. This one focuses exclusively on Capote, and it talks largely about a period in his life toward the end of his career when he was writing a novel called Answered Prayers. And it was essentially a tell-all about New York society. He thought he was being cute and funny and witty, and kept insisting, oh no, this is just fiction, this is just fiction. When in fact, it was based largely on his knowledge and relationships with a number of members of New York high society. And in particular, the revelation of some of their dirty little secrets. He had been collecting information about them for years, and decided that he was going to put them into a book that he thought was going to be his literary masterpiece. And he ended up never finishing it. In fact, only a couple of chapters were published as excerpts in Esquire magazine. But basically, when the people who were his friends read what he had written, they all turned on him and said, go do what to yourself.
Really?
Yes, because he was being extremely explicit in terms of the detail that he was providing in his stories, that anybody who traveled in those circles knew exactly who he was talking about, even though he changed the names.
Yep.
And he thought that would be sufficient enough for people not to be able to recognize who he was talking about.
Cheeky.
Well, come on.
If you go into such detail, people are going to know, and they're going to call you out on it and tell you to go, yourself.
Yeah. He ended up telling one story about a New York socialite who supposedly had her husband killed.
Goodness.
Yeah, to collect the money because he was very wealthy. Well, everybody knew who he was talking about. And even though he changed the names, the story clearly came out that, yes, he was indeed writing about socialite Anne Woodward. And, that didn't sit well with her and her friends. And
wow. No, fair enough. It wouldn't sit well with me either.
He also told a story about Bill Paley, who was chairman of CBS, who was known for being kind of a serial womanizer, and ended up writing about a rather embarrassing incident that Mr. Paley experienced while he was having sex with one of the women who he was having an affair with. And again, in explicit detail, that it was, you couldn't not know who he was talking about. So this is a cautionary tale. It tells about the downward spiral of a artistic icon, because he ended up losing his friends. He ended up having difficulties in his relationship. His health deteriorated, and he never finished the book. And he actually never wrote another book again after that. So it's kind of sad, but it's a very strong cautionary tale that to me embodies the notion of one of my favorite old world expressions, which is don't where you eat. And that's exactly what he did.
Yeah.
I even got to be kind of arrogant about the way he was approaching it, where he was saying that he said in a TV interview that I think the only people who are going to be bothered by this book are the ones who I've left out.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. That's pretty ballsy.
It is pretty ballsy.
So, and it just sort of all blew up in his face. So the way this film is put together is it features a lot of archive material, archive footage from his life and his the different people he was involved with, intercut with contemporary interviews of people who either knew him or who have studied his work. And it also includes archive recordings from a book that was written by journalist George Plimpton, who basically chronicled the downfall of Capote after he attempted to write this book, when it came to his relationships with his circle of friends. And those tape recordings have never been made publicly available until this film.
Wow.
Plimpton used them as research material to write his book, but the tapes themselves were never released. And in this film, there are quite a few sound bites from people like Lauren Bacall, William F. Buckley, Norman Mailer, Candice Bergen. Again, the list just kind of goes on and on and on. So,
really, wow, yeah. It's like there's just so much as part of this movie that hasn't been showcased before, and in a completely different way, right? Yeah. It's very there's a lot of hidden stuff that's being brought to this.
There really is. I mean, sometimes a lot of things.
I don't always agree with that, though. Sometimes I think that let sleeping dogs lie, but
Well, I think probably what may have inspired it in part was the fact that there have been so many glowing works about Capote. You know, he was such a great writer and did this and did that and blah, 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 blah. But he also had a very dark side. And in this case, the dark side came out and it cost him dearly.
Yeah.
And that's something that I think, a lot of people were unaware of, the side of Capote that was not apparent. And even his personal experience aside, this really is a very good cautionary tale in terms of don't go down the same road he went down.
Yep.
And it was a road that he went down that really he should have known better. But he was kind of caught up in his own self-aggrandizement and delusional thinking that
he was above it all.
Yeah, and that, oh, of course, my friends they'll obviously recognize this as the work of fiction that it is,
and that it's okay to talk about it, and that that I'm putting their skeletons out there and talking about them, but yet I'm using other, you're covering it with other people's names or whatever, and you're making them a fictional character. Can't do that.
He even said at one point in a movie, in a television interview, that these people are my material.
Wow. Ooh.
Well, I mean, talk about treating people like commodities.
Ooh, yeah.
And the thing is, it also sheds some light on some of his other writings in the fact that they talk about some of the characters in his other works who were based on real life involvements that he had. For example, it comes to light in the film that the character of Holly Golightly, the protagonist of Breakfast at Tiffany's, was in many ways based on Truman's own mother. And, Holly Golightly was sometimes somewhat dubious in terms of the way she dealt with life and the way she approached life. A lot of self-interest being brought to the surface. And apparently his mother was the same way. She abandoned him when he was age 2 and sent him off to live with relatives. And then when she got remarried, suddenly she wanted him back. So, then he was brought back into her life when he was around 8. So, there's almost like a streak of retribution that's running through his motivations for doing things.
Sure.
And this film shows that. And it's kind of an ugly side of the person. But, it's something, again, I think that people need to see to make sure, again, that they don't follow the same path themselves when they may be tempted to do so.
Yeah. Very interesting. Ooh, I'm excited about this one. In theaters now?
It's like Lamb, it's wrapping up its theatrical run right now, but it is available for streaming from multiple sources.
Okay.
So.
And how many stars?
4. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, this was impressive also in the fact that this was the debut documentary feature by the director. He did a great job on his first time out, so that he really deserves to be commended for that.
Interesting. Okay, well, I'll look out for that one. I hope other people do as well. You've brought some really great points to the table. Sometimes get really I guess that's just when people's stories are being told when they're not there to defend themselves. I have a really that kind of kicks me, but that's this history. It's all part of our history. It's all part of documentary. It's all part of cinema. But there's just a side to me that gets very compassionate because there's always 3 sides to every story, yours, mine, and the truth,
absolutely.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when you look at some of the things that Capote endured, there were some ways in which he did not have an easy life. I mean,
one of
the things that could be offered as a motivation for why he ended up trying to write Answered Prayers was the fact that even though he was welcomed into New York high society, he was often treated like a court jester. He would be invited to these elite parties, and because he was so eccentric, exotic, and witty, he was, as his adoptive daughter says in the film, he was the entertainment.
Yeah.
And he was being used, and maybe on some level he recognized that, and felt, hey, I've been taken advantage of here. Maybe I need to set the record straight, or at very least, kind of get back at these people for doing these things to me.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, it's entertainment, right?
Yep.
That's what we're watching, is entertainment.
Yep.
So, okay. Anything else about this one?
No, I think that pretty well covers it.
Awesome.
It's a good picture. I really recommend it.
Good. Well,
And as I say, it was made 2 years ago. I first saw it a year ago at a film festival, and at the time I said to myself, when is this going to get released? This is a terrific picture. And I guess it took a while for the distribution deals to get finalized and go through, but they finally did, and now it's out there. So go see it.
Awesome. Okay, go see it. All right, and the last one.
Okay, the last one is a film that I saw through the Brooklyn Sci-Fi Film Festival. I was actually hoping to get a full write-up done before this interview, but didn't get a chance to. It's called The Worlds of Ursula K. Le Guin. And she was a science fiction writer who was in many ways way ahead of her time. She ended up writing about stories involving sophisticated science fiction and fantasy at a time when it was being really treated as pretty much a cheap and pulpy genre.
Mm-hmm.
She ended up having a pretty strong influence in terms of affecting a number of social movements, particularly like in women's issues and in the treatment of Native American people. And the people who talk about her in the film talk about how she also broke a lot of ground in terms of experimenting and writing that opened up doors for a lot of people who followed her. She essentially kind of gave them permission to write in the ways that they wanted to write that probably never would have been tolerated before her works had been published. As one person says, you never would have had Harry Potter, for example, if it hadn't been for Ursula K. Le Guin. So this film basically explores a number of elements from her work over the years, and interviews a number of people, again, who either knew her or who studied her, to offer their insights. There are also quite a few interviews with Le Guin herself. They were recorded not long before she died, so they were really lucky to get those in while she was still around. And it's a beautiful film to look at, in the fact that many of the sequences of the books that they talk about are enhanced with absolutely gorgeous animation. Just really stunningly beautiful things to look at. So the film itself actually originally came out a few years ago, and where it aired as part of the American Masters series on PBS. And the film has since been made available for streaming from multiple sources. But it's also periodically showing up at film festivals like this one, which were focused on sci-fi. And it really was a fitting tribute to Le Guin in terms of bringing a degree of respectability to a genre that was at one time treated very much like kind of a joke. So it's a good film, very good film.
Well, you've got a theme, except for lamb, in the movies that you picked this month. There's the journalism writing theme.
Yeah, there really is. I actually didn't recognize that overtly when I first made up the lineup, but yes, that's very true. And there's also parallel themes in some of the films too, like Lamb and the Capote Tapes both are cautionary tales too. So
yeah, that's true.
So
interesting. Okay, so tell me, even the movie poster of this movie, it's won everything and played at everything.
Yeah, it's played at a lot of festivals.
Yeah, I'm gonna pull it up here again. And I'm sorry, you probably already said this. It's in theaters now? No, you watched this.
It's available for streaming.
It's available for streaming. That's right. Okay.
Yeah, it's available on Amazon and a few other sources, I believe. So, and since American Masters was a PBS series, you could probably go to the PBS website as well and look there.
Okay, why did you pick this one?
There was a movie that was made based on one of Le Guin's works in the early 80s called The Lathe of Heaven that I absolutely was mesmerized by it when it came out. It was a film that it was made for PBS, and it was a film that made a splash at the time that it was released and then virtually disappeared. It was kind of hard to find anywhere. And then it ended up surfacing in a few locations from limited distributor video sources. And I had a chance to watch it again and was just mesmerized by it a second time. So that made me a fan of her work from the get-go. Is it work?
From the 80s.
Yeah. Well, I mean, her writing actually goes back further than that. It goes back to, I believe she started writing in the 50s.
Wow.
And actually, one of my few disappointments with this documentary is that they really didn't talk that much about the Lathe of Heaven in this film, even though it has since it was written, it's been made into movies for TV twice. And the one from the early 80s is quite good. The second one, which was made, I believe, around 2002, you can skip. That one wasn't very well adapted, but it's quite a fascinating story. If you ever get a chance to check that one out, by all means, go for it.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. How many stars?
4.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So out of the 4, you picked Lamb. Lamb was the top one for you. And this one and Capote. Nope.
Yep.
That's right. Got 4.
Capote.
And then the
3.5 for the French Dispatch.
Yeah, which I thought I'm surprised, but I'm still gonna watch it. I think it's well worth a watch for sure.
Yep.
Awesome. Okay, so those are the ones that the feature ones that you wanted to speak about. Now we're gonna talk about the ones to avoid.
Yeah.
Oh, ba.
Boy, I'll tell you, this was a very unexpected list in many ways. The first of the ones to avoid is the much anticipated science fiction film Dune, which is a remake from a movie that was made in originally in the 80s. Dazzling special effects, beautiful cinematography, boring as sin. It's just
really,
yeah. I mean, it's
that's
2.5 hours, I believe, and it's like watching paint dry. It's the kind of movie you really wish you had a fast forward button to go through.
When I saw that on your list, I was like, no. The 2 out of the 3 that I had been anticipating, I was really surprised, and I was really like, come on.
Yeah, and the other thing too is that essentially the movie is really not complete. It's you'll see the second half of the story in Dune Part 2. And that really bothers me with movies that they keep when they don't stand alone.
Yeah.
I know that there are some times when it can be done and you can make a quality enough story and reach enough of a cliffhanger point where you can get away with not telling the whole story at one time. A case in point would be like The Empire Strikes Back.
Yep.
Or the Lord of the Rings movies, or some of the Hunger Games movies. But with Dune, it just really falls flat. And it's also plagued by problems with miscasting. There are some people in who are quite good, but the lead role played by Timothée Chalamet, he's just not up to it. I mean, he's
really,
yeah. I mean, he was fine in the French Dispatch. That's a role much more suited to his sensibilities, but it just didn't work here. So
well, and you know what? And when I saw the movie poster, I was like, look at all these people. Look at all the talent they're going to have. So that's
there are some people in it who are quite good, but are underused too. I mean, Javier Bardem and Josh Brolin.
I love Josh Brolin. I love Josh Brolin. He's one of my
Charlotte
favorite. He's very
Charlotte
handsome.
Rampling, who I also love. I mean, they're not really given a whole lot to do. So
Well,
I mean, there are a lot of diehard fans who are going to see it
yeah,
because they're fans of the material.
fair enough.
And okay, if you really want to see it that badly, then go see it. If you're a fan of dazzling special effects and great cinematography, yeah, then you might want to see that too. But pack a pillow and a lunch for this one otherwise.
Wow, that's disappointing. You got to be at the best of your day. Stay awake by the sounds of it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's a letdown. Okay, next one.
Okay, so the next one that was a letdown, and this was a bit of a surprise for me also, is No Time to Die.
Yeah, super surprised to see that on there.
Yeah, the latest film in the James Bond franchise, and this film's release was delayed 3 times because of the pandemic, and it had been given such a build-up prior to its release that when it finally was ready to come out, I was like, okay, I'm ready to go see this.
Yeah.
And this, unfortunately, suffers from some of the same problems as Dune. It's too long, it's too talky, and some of the signature elements that really make the Bond movies work, the dazzling special effects and the action adventure sequences, are all pretty flat here.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, they include them, but they're not exactly, edge of your seat kinds of images. Now, part of that had to do with the fact that while Daniel Craig has been playing James Bond, they've been trying to do different things with the character. They've been trying to make him, less the macho womanizer and a bit more grounded and sensible and down to earth and all that sort of thing. And I applaud them for doing that, but they've watered it down to a point almost where it's just become dull. And that's really kind of the case of what happens here.
Oh, sorry. Who's your favorite James Bond actor?
Well, I'm really kind of in a very big minority on this one. My favorite James Bond actor was George Lazenby, who played Bond only in one film called On Her Majesty's Secret Service. I thought he really had the acting chops for the part. That was also a Bond film where they tried to do more with the character, but they didn't lose the essence of the character in trying to do more with him. It's in many ways, I think they were trying to do in No Time to Die some of the same things that they did in On Her Majesty's Secret Service, and it doesn't work as well here as it did there. So. Like I say, I'm really kind of in a very small minority picking him as my favorite Bond because most people haven't even heard of him.
Truth. I was like, Sean Connery, Pierce Brosnan, and I was like, what? Who's that person? But I'm not surprised that you picked that person. Let's be honest, friend.
As far as the ones who did multiple movies, I would say probably Sean Connery.
Oh, I miss Sean Connery.
I mean, he was just he set the template for the character.
Sure did. Yeah, he sure did. Well, I'm really disappointed. And do you think that this is going to be, there's something that you said that caught my attention about there was just so much hype, and there's, because there's been movies that have been delayed, their release has been delayed because of COVID. One that I'm dying to see because I'm an 80s person is Top Gun. And I don't want it to come out because I'm so nervous that it's just going to be something that I'm going to be like, what the hell is this? And that concerns me. So when you're saying like this, I'm like, I don't know if I just had such a build-up because I was just ready for another Bond movie.
I think that was the case for a lot of people, and definitely for me, because I was expecting more than what I got.
Isn't that the case though? When you're expecting, you're going to be disappointed.
And again, at 2 hours and 45 minutes.
Jesus. Bring your pillow.
I mean, they could have cut this by probably a half an hour and it would have made a whole lot of difference.
Wow. Okay. The third one.
Boy, this one. This is a French movie called Titan. and it was the winner of the Best Picture at the Cannes Film Festival, and was recently named the French entry into the International Film Competition for the Oscars. This is just
terrible. Is it just downright terrible?
Terrible. I mean, I appreciate the fact that it's trying to do some things that are different, but it's so out there in terms of being a combination horror movie, sexploitation movie, cautionary tale, domestic drama. I mean, all these different things that are sort of thrown together into a giant blender, and they've tried to come up with a story explaining all of it. They don't do a very good job of it. And it also really is seriously lacking in a backstory. So you really have no idea where this whacked out protagonist of the story is coming from. There are lots of times where the movie is like incredibly gratuitous. So you got a weak stomach, stay home, or don't order concessions when you're watching it. And it's also extremely sexual.
Yep.
And some of the sexuality is just really truly bizarre.
What drew you to this movie? Because you obviously were drawn to it for some other reason that before you even knew it.
Well, I went to see it. I went to see it because it's gotten a lot of hype as being, a strong Oscar contender. Which, as I say, it's been named the official French entry for the Oscars. Whether it gets nominated or not is another story. But given the fact that it has the pedigree of being named the Best Picture at the Cannes Film Festival going in, certainly gives it a lot of clout.
Absolutely.
But sometimes the French taste in movies just absolutely baffles me. As I said to my partner after we came out of the theater, we were talking about how much the French like this. I said, I guess this helps to explain the whole Jerry Lewis fascination a lot more now too. So, yeah.
Oh my goodness.
So if you're wondering on grades for these movies, I gave Dune and No Time to Die 2.5.
Yep.
And I gave Titan 1. And that's being generous.
And you didn't walk out?
No, I never walk out of movies.
You never walk out of a movie. Okay.
When I commit, I go in and I stick with it.
And don't even fall asleep or anything.
Sometimes I might start to get drowsy.
A little dozy. Yeah, exactly. But you don't leave, and that's key. I've only walked out of a couple movies and just like I just can't. So good for you.
You won't get drowsy by Titan because the images are so graphic and in some ways it's like watching a bad car accident unfold. You hate to see it, but you can't take your eyes off.
Can't stop watching. Interesting. Okay. So, I'm looking at timing here. We've got 10 minutes and we have a big list of notables that you want to talk about. So let's get on it. I won't interrupt you. You just do you. Okay.
Okay. So from the Brooklyn Sci-Fi Film Festival, I'm recommending a film called Light Ships, which is a really interesting and very thoughtful film that takes a little bit of thinking to fully appreciate. But it's definitely got a lot of really interesting ideas on it, particularly having to do with where we might be evolving as a species.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah. Down in Paris came from the Reeling Film Festival, the LGBTQ festival. The story of a filmmaker who is experiencing a meltdown and needs to get away from the set where he's filming. And he ends up spending the night walking the streets of Paris, where he ends up meeting a whole variety of people, some whom he knows, some whom he doesn't. And it ends up giving him a whole new outlook on life. I really liked it in particular in the fact that it was a gay film that's not limiting itself to just dealing with gay issues. It's dealing with personal issues as well. To me, that's significant because that's a big evolutionary step in gay cinema. So it was named the winner of the best narrative feature at the Reeling Film Festival, and I can see why. I really enjoyed it a lot. Next, we have Lola, otherwise known as Lola or La Mer, which is a film from Belgium and France. Tells the story of a young pre-op trans male who is thrown into kind of an unexpected road trip movie with his estranged father when they need to go scatter the ashes of their dead wife and mother in her hometown on the seacoast. And, it's a case where you don't expect these people to even be together, let alone to see how they end up interacting with each other as the story plays out. Very gripping, very heartwarming, but also you see a lot of venting going on between the two characters.
I'm sorry, a lot of
venting.
Oh, venting. Okay.
Yeah, in terms of the way their life had been prior to that point.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, very good. Saw that one at Reeling as well. Then there's At the End of Heaven, otherwise known as Amen, which is an Iranian film, which tells the story of it's another story involving a pre-op transsexual male who is looking for a sponsor to pay for the surgery. And he ends up getting caught up in a web of rather creepy people who initially promise the world, but then you suddenly start seeing all kinds of strings attached to it. This is a particularly interesting film in the fact that it's shot from the perspective of the protagonist being the camera. So you never really even see the lead actor directly, you just hear his voice. But yes, it's a very inventive style of filmmaking. An interesting way of telling the story. And some of it doesn't always seem like it's going to come together clearly, but then as the story unfolds more, you start to see how all the various strands that have been dangled before you connect. Mm-hmm. So it's really a very good, at times rather chilling story, but one that is also poignant for showing viewers just what members of the trans community in Iran have to deal with.
Wow. Okay.
Then next we have Potato Dreams of America, which is a story that is basically a memoir about a young Russian gay man who dreams of emigrating to America and ends up getting his opportunity to do so when his mother decides that she wants to leave Russia also and signs up to become a mail order bride.
Ooh.
And they end up coming to America, and it's the story of them going from wishing to living out the American dream. And it's filmed with a variety of styles. Some of it, particularly when they're still in Russia and a lot of things are still in the idea stage, reminds me of a Wes Anderson film in terms of the sets and the costumes and so forth. It's very entertaining. It reminds me a lot of like a film version of an episode of the TV series, The Wonder Years.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah. So, and actually even one of the characters from the original Wonder Years series is in the movie. So that's kind of an interesting little tidbit.
Homage,
Okay, so next we have a film from the Chicago International Film Festival. This ended up being my favorite film from the Chicago Festival this year, The Worst Person in the World. It's a Norwegian story about a young woman who is unable to make up her mind about what she wants from life. And she ends up being actually rather candid and open about it. But even though she's candid and open and honest about it, she still has an impact on the people around her in terms of the way she's leading her life. And it's very insightfully written. It's beautifully filmed. The actress who plays the lead, Renata Reinsve, won the Best Actress Award at the Cannes Film Festival. Mm-hmm. as I say, this ended up being my favorite film from the Chicago Film Festival, and it definitely got a 5 out of 5. So
Wow. Okay.
yeah,
Notable right there. The
yeah,
worst person in the world.
first person in
Okay.
the world. Yeah, and I believe it's already got a distribution deal lined up, so it will be released, I think, at some point.
Good. Nice. Okay.
Okay, next we have the American documentary Exposure, which tells the story of a group of women who formed an expedition to visit the North Pole while it's still accessible. The problem there being the fact that with global warming, the ice is melting quickly and making the journey dangerous. So this tells the story of their adventure. It also tells the individual stories of many of the women. Really well done film. Recommended highly.
Okay. Exposure. Okay.
Exposure. Okay. Next, we have Skal, which means cheers. It's a film from Denmark and the Faroe Islands. It is also a documentary. It tells the story of a relationship between a young woman who grew up in a Christian community and starts having a relationship with a rather outspoken rapper, I should say. And it exposes her to new ideas that she had never been exposed to before. And the question is, how is she going to deal with that for herself? How is she going to guarantee the continuation of the relationship? And how is her family going to react to her decisions?
Mm-hmm.
Very well done. Very well done. Next, we have a multinational production called The Gravedigger's Wife, which is many ways reminded me of like an O. Henry story. It tells the story of a gravedigger who is having trouble eking out a living in Djibouti. And suddenly his wife becomes quite ill and he has to come up with the money to pay for her surgery to save her life. But in doing so, he ends up having to risk his own life to make that happen. Nice, touching love story.
Wow. Okay.
Next, we have Amira, which is a story from the Middle East. It tells the story of a young woman who adores her father, but he's been incarcerated as a Palestinian terrorist by the Israelis. And she's only known him basically by jail visits because his mother became pregnant with his seed that was smuggled out of jail.
Wow. Ooh.
And now they have an opportunity to have another child, only she finds out that he's not really her dad.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah. This is another one that I gave 5 out of 5 to.
Okay.
Yeah. Next, we have a French film, Madeleine Collins, which is a story very much in like the Hitchcock vein. A woman who's leading 2 lives, one in France and one in Switzerland. And viewers are left to figure out, what's she doing? And why is this playing out the way it does? Keeps you guessing all the way through.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah, really liked it a lot. It was another 5.
Oh, wow. Third one. Okay.
Third one. So
make note of that.
Yep. Then we have My Brother's Dream Awake, which is a film from Chile. Tells the story of 2 brothers who were in a juvenile prison, and they would like to be able to rejoin the world of the living. Unfortunately, there are no guardians to claim them because when they were jailed, their mother disowned them. And it also, examines, life in this environment, how they had to cope with it. Very, very heart-rending film.
Yeah, the synopsis that you're giving, that just, as soon as you said she disowned them, I was just like, yeah, that's a tough one.
And then lastly, we have the British-Belgian production, Nobody Has to Know, which tells the story of a relationship between a stroke survivor and his caretaker, who tells him, we used to be lovers, and he doesn't remember anything about it.
But were they?
I would be a spoiler if I.
Okay, don't spoil it. Don't spoil it. Okay, you left me hanging. That's a cliffhanger for sure.
But it's really very well made. It ended up winning the Chicago Film Festival awards for Best Actor and Best Actress.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's very well performed, and it too is gorgeously filmed.
Okay, are you giving it a what?
I gave that one 4.
Okay. Okay, so 3 5s, lots of stuff going on here. So the 3 5s, the worst person in the world, Amira and Madeleine Collins.
Yeah, and I would give 4s to all the others except for Lola. I gave 3.5.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, and where is this list available?
You can see it on the mini summaries of each of these on the Good Media Network website.
Okay.
You'll see posters for each of them as well as summary reviews.
Perfect. And people can always go to you, brentmarchant.com, reach out to you if they have any questions, have any, like recommendations, or if they've missed something over what we've talked about and that they want to have a little bit more insight, they can absolutely reach out to you directly,
Yes,
brentmarchant.com. And we're up. It is 12:01 and another month is coming to a close. It's sad. Such great ones that you brought to the table today. As always, I'm so excited to spend an hour with you, Brent. And I know that our viewers and our listeners really appreciate what you bring to the table. I know that I'm just always adding movies to my list, and taking advantage of the entertainment and the film variety and the really beautiful works of art that people are creating.
Hopefully I'll have a lot more next month, because starting next week, I stream the St. Louis Film Festival and I'm signed up for 23 movies.
Jeez, it just doesn't stop. Okay, so November, we are going to be live again in November. We're still in talks about what's going to happen in December, but November for sure. And we will have something in December. We just don't know what that's going to look like. Santa's coming. We need to be prepared. Okay, until next time, thanks again, Brent. Thanks for anybody who's watching. And thanks again. I really appreciate it. And I'll see you next month.
My pleasure. Take care, Danielle.
Bye.
Bye-bye.